Senator Bayh, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have a prepared statement that, with your permission, I would ask to be entered into the record. We're here today to hear and learn from all of you, not just to listen to ourselves. So I'd just like to make 3 quick points. Number one, Senator Dorgan, I'd like to thank you and everybody at the DPC. Without your focus on this, this set of circumstances would never have come to light. And the opportunity to make sure that it never happens again would not be before us. So I would like to thank you on behalf of the Indiana National Guard and all those of us who care about this for your determination and for your focus. Secondly, I've got 2 principal interests in this. First, to ensure that all those of you who were exposed and others who were potentially exposed get the treatment to which you are entitled. You served our country honorably. You deserve the best medical care possible. We shouldn't put the burden of proof on you because there are photographs of piles of this stuff sitting around there. There's no doubt at all that people were exposed, so you shouldn't be in the position, as Senator Dorgan was saying, today or 5 years or 10 years from now trying to go back and prove that it was service-related. So that's my principal concern, is to make sure that you're treated well and get the medical care to which you deserve. And then the second thing, Senator Dorgan, would make sure that this kind of thing never happens again. We need to look at gaps in the system. Why was there not more timely notification to the Army? Why were the environmental assessments not done in an appropriate way? What needs to be put into place in future contracts to make sure this kind of thing never, ever happens again? So once we get the appropriate care in place, we need to look at the contracting process. One other thing to my colleagues, why was the Indiana National Guard not notified in a timely way? This is of tremendous concern to General Umbarger, the commander of our Guard. We need to look at the inter-Army procedures with regard to this as well. Finally, to make sure that this sort of thing is redressed, I've introduced legislation. Senators Dorgan and Rockefeller, several others, including Senator Lugar from my own home state, are supporting me in this effort to do what we did with regard to Agent Orange, Byron, to basically shift the burden of proof and say if you served in conditions like this, you are entitled to the best care available. The burden should not be on you and your loved ones to come forward and prove that it was service-related. If you're exposed to something like sodium dichromate, the burden is on us to provide you the care that you are entitled to. So we have included this in legislation. I hope we can get this enacted here in the very near future. And I want to thank you and Senator Rockefeller for your support. And Captain Kimberling, I'm particularly interested in hearing from you and want to thank you for your service to our country. Captain Kimberling, you testified that you escorted a group of, was it KBR employees who had the white suits on, the environmental suits on, to the site? Did I understand your testimony correctly?
Civilian attired. I couldn't say whether they were, Corps of Engineers or KBR.
But they had
civilian attire on.
A civilian attire?
Civilian.
I thought you said they had environmental suits.
Well, they had it. When they got in the vehicles, civilian attire. When they got out of the vehicles at the site, they had on their white PPE, the gear.
So when you were, why do you suppose they put that on before they got out of the vehicles?
They knew something we didn't.
Well, that's my point. And so they drove up in civilian attire, but before they got out to set foot on the ground, they put on the environmental suits, obviously indicating they were worried about something.
Yes.
But you and your men and women hadn't been informed of anything by that point, correct?
Correct.
At what point after that, if at all, were you informed?
It was within a couple of weeks that Colonel Gentry, once we figured out what it was, we were informed and we didn't go back to the site.
So there were at least a couple weeks there when, presumably they didn't find out that day. So there, a period of some time, at least a couple weeks, probably sometime longer, that people were aware that there was some pretty hazardous stuff there, so much that they wanted to protect themselves, but you and your men hadn't been notified.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Gibb, take me back in your testimony. You pointed out a conundrum where I think that at different points in the report, the data said that the level was undetectable, but then they said that the data also showed that the level was within certain ranges. I mean, you asked the question, how could this be? What's your answer to your own question?
Well,
if it is undetectable, it's hard to understand how you could place it within various ranges.
Well, that was the point. I mean, I don't understand what they're saying in this.
And this was the Army's report?
This was the Chipham report. I don't know if you have the Chipham report in front of you, but if you go to the second page.
Well, let me ask you your own question then. I mean, if you're an observer of these things, how could that be?
Well, it can't. I mean, it's like, there,
Well, since the report contains something that's sort of obviously impossible on its face, you care to hazard a guess as to how they can include that in a document like this?
I just don't know. I mean, they haven't expressed it appropriately, or I don't know how they could put it in there. I mean, you have to read it several times and say, I don't understand what they're talking about.
It's not uncommon that government documents, unfortunately, are hard to understand, but rarely do they include assertions that are mutually exclusive and therefore impossible to both be true. But that seems to be the case here, and is something this committee should look into.
Senator Bayh, would you yield just for a moment?
Absolutely.
Let me put into the record, in relation to this, we had received from the University of Pittsburgh Graduate School of Public Health, Dr. Aaron Barshowski, Associate Professor, has written a response July 30th on this issue. And let me read just one short paragraph. Quote, "The observations by the military and KBR personnel that thick orange dust covered the site and was made airborne by frequent dust storms indicate that the potential for exposure to chromium was very high. The symptoms that developed indicate that the individual doses received were well in excess of safe occupational exposures levels of the metal." And I want to put that in the record and ask Dr. Gibb, do you generally agree with that conclusion?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
We'll include that in the record.
Well, my final observation, Senator, would simply be getting back to Captain Kimberly and his men and women. It's clear that somebody higher up the food chain knew what was going on. It was dangerous, but they hadn't informed your folks at the ground level, and that's just unacceptable. I mean, the first instinct ought to be to protect the folks who are out there on the front line, not warning these people who are showing up, putting on the white suits to protect themselves, but not cluing you guys in that you're getting exposed every day to something that they're clearly pretty worried about. That's unacceptable.